Some historians call it the longest cemetery on Earth. For more than 2,000 years, men were marched north to build a wall across China, and many never came home. Their bodies, the old stories say, were pressed into the very earth they raised. This is the story of that wall, not one wall but many, and the human cost buried inside it. We picture a single gray ribbon of stone snaking over green mountains. That picture is a lie of convenience. There was never one great wall. There were dozens built by rival kingdoms and rival dynasties in mud, in brick, in stacked stone across 15 centuries. In 2012, a Chinese survey measured every trace of them. The total came to more than 21,000 kilometers. To understand the wall, start with the enemy. North of China lay a sea of grass, and on it rode the horse peoples of the steppe, the Xiongnu. They were faster than any farmer's army, striking villages and vanishing. For the settled kingdoms of the Yellow River, the horizon itself was a threat. Long before any emperor, these kingdoms began throwing up walls of packed earth to slow the riders down. In 221 BC, one king ended the wars. Ying Zheng of Qin conquered every rival and declared himself Qin Shi Huang, first emperor. He standardized the script, the coins, the very width of cart axles. Then he looked north at the scattered border walls of the old kingdoms and gave an order that would echo for centuries. Join them, make one line, seal the frontier from end to end. The task fell to his finest general, Meng Tian, and to an army the histories number at 300,000. But soldiers alone could not raise such a thing. So the emperor sent the others, convicts, debtors, disgraced officials, conscripted peasants torn from their fields. They walked for weeks to reach the frontier. Many understood as they walked that this was a sentence and the wall would be their whole remaining life. They built with what the land gave them. In the Low S country, they used rammed earth, wooden frames packed with soil, pounded layer by layer until it set like rock. The work was endless. Men hauled baskets up bare ridges in summer heat and winter wind. Food came late or never. Illness moved through the camps. Those who died were buried where they fell, close beside the rising wall. Here is what survives of that first great wall: almost nothing. The Qin Wall was not the stone rampart tourists photograph. It was mostly packed earth, and it ran far to the north of the wall we know today, deep in what is now Inner Mongolia. Wind and rain have worn it to low brown mounds. If the wall was meant to last forever, it barely outlived the man who built it. So did it even work? The first emperor died in 210 BC, and his dynasty fell within 4 years. But the wall did not die with him. The Han dynasty that followed took the idea and stretched it westward, out along a thin corridor of oases toward the deserts of Central Asia. This was the road we now call the Silk Road, and the wall became its shield, protecting the caravans that carried Chinese silk toward Rome. The Han Wall was not just a barrier, it was a nervous system. Every few kilometers stood a beacon tower manned by a handful of soldiers scanning the empty north. When riders appeared, the watchmen lit signals, smoke by day, fire by night, and the warning leapt tower to tower faster than any horse. Within hours, a frontier hundreds of miles long knew that the enemy had come. Out of these centuries came a story the Chinese still tell. A young woman named Meng Jiangnu traveled to bring winter clothes to her husband, a conscript on the wall. When she arrived, she learned he was already dead, his body sealed inside the stonework. She wept, and the histories claim her grief was so great that a section of the wall collapsed, giving up his bones. It is legend. It is also grief made into architecture. Not every dynasty loved the wall. After the Han, China broke apart for centuries, and its rulers had little use for a frontier line. Some emperors thought walls a confession of weakness, proof you could not defeat the enemy in the open field. For long stretches, the ramparts were left to crumble, patched here and there, then abandoned again. The wall was never a single project. It was an argument that flared and died across 1,000 years. And the wall did more than block armies. It was a line that men and goods could only cross at a gate. And a gate is a place where you pay. Soldiers at the passes taxed the caravans, inspected travelers, turned back those without papers. The wall regulated who came in and who went out, what was traded, what was smuggled. It was, in part, the world's longest customs barrier. As a wall to keep armies out, it failed again and again. Determined invaders went around it, bribed through it, or waited for a dynasty to rot from within. Historians argue that pure defense was never the whole point. The wall marked the edge of the settled world, taxing trade, controlling migration, keeping restless subjects in as much as keeping raiders out. So why did the Ming pour a fortune into the greatest wall of all? The answer begins with a wound. In the 13th century, the walls failed utterly. Genghis Khan and his Mongol horsemen swept past them, and his grandson Kublai finished the work, conquering all of China and ruling it from a throne in the north. For nearly a century, the people of China lived under foreign masters. The wall had promised protection. The wall had not delivered. In 1368, a peasant-born rebel drove the Mongols back onto the steppe and founded the Ming dynasty. But the memory of conquest never left them. The Mongols were not destroyed. They had only retreated, and they still raided from the grasslands. The Ming tried to crush them in the field, and in 1449 lost an entire army and their own emperor in a single catastrophe. After that, they stopped attacking and started building. This is the wall you know. From the late 15th century, the Ming raised a barrier unlike anything before it, not packed earth, but a spine of quarried stone and fired brick, wide enough for soldiers to march along the top. It climbed the sharpest ridges north of Beijing, tower after tower, a fortress stretched thin across the mountains. Everything the camera loves about the Great Wall, the Ming built. The numbers are staggering. The Ming Wall ran for nearly 9,000 kilometers, bound together by millions upon millions of bricks. The mortar holding them carried a strange secret ingredient: sticky rice. Boiled glutinous rice was mixed into the lime, and the result was a mortar so strong that weeds struggle to prise those joints apart even now. It was, for its age, an almost unimaginable feat of engineering. And it had to be lived on. Ming garrisons spent their lives in the towers, watching a frontier that could stay silent for months. They grew vegetables in the passes, ground their own grain, and burned wolf dung in the beacons, because its smoke, they believed, rose straightest in the wind. It was lonely, cold, and often forgotten by the capital. Pay arrived late. Men deserted. The wall was only ever as strong as the tired men on it. The wall in your photographs is younger than you think. Those grand brick ramparts are barely 500 years old, the newest layer on 2 millennia of ruins. And for all its strength, it fell without a battle. In 1644, with rebels sacking Beijing, a Ming general named Wu Sangui chose the Manchus over the chaos and simply opened the gate at Shanhai Pass. The greatest wall on earth was undone from the inside. He had a reason, of course. The Ming was already collapsing from within: famine, revolt, an emperor who hanged himself as rebels poured into his capital. Wu Sangui, caught between a rebel army and the Manchu horsemen at his gate, gambled on the invaders. The Manchus rode through Shanhai Pass and did not leave. They founded the Qing dynasty and ruled China for the next 267 years. And then the wall lost its purpose entirely. The Qing rulers were themselves people of the north. The steppe was their homeland, not their enemy. They had no frontier to seal because the land on both sides was now theirs. So the towers emptied. The garrisons went home. The greatest fortification in human history was left to the wind, the grass, and the slow patience of the rain. Which brings us back to the bones. For centuries, people believed the dead were mortared into the wall itself. Archaeologists have found graves beside it, not bodies within the brick. But the burials are real, and they are countless. We will never have a true number. The old claim of 1 million dead is a guess dressed as a fact. Yet stand on any lonely stretch, and you are standing in a cemetery. Today, most of that cemetery is vanishing. Of the Ming Wall, less than 10% survives in good condition. Nearly a third has already crumbled away. The polished sections tourists climb near Beijing are heavily rebuilt, modern stone laid on old foundations. What we photograph as ancient is, in places, almost new. The wall is still being made even now by the people who refuse to let it fall. So there was never one great wall, and it never quite did what the legends say. It failed as often as it held. But it was real in the one way that outlasts stone, in the lives it cost. 20,000 kilometers of earth and brick raised by the forgotten and remembered by almost no one by name. The longest thing we ever built, and the longest grave. Subscribe and we'll keep reconstructing the world that history left behind.